Well, I'm glad. Hey, what's up, guys? Venice Beach, thank you for the heads up. Should be all good as long as you are still in here. We just wanted to make sure to have a little bit of inside conversation before we get it started. What's up, guys? Jeremy here, joined on the line by Caleb of Caleb Says Stuff, and people are terrible. What's up?
I can't believe they missed our entire meth conversation.
Oh, it was so good. You guys missed out on so much meth talk. We just now were discussing the fact that yesterday in Georgia, some candy-shaped meth was discovered. So they're saying, watch your kids. Watch your kids. There's dope going around. Halloween candy laced with weed or meth is possible, says the DEA. Check. It would be so funny to see little kids rolling. Anyways. Well, what's up, guys? Welcome to the show. We are going to just kind of open forum discuss horror movies tonight. We're going to first do our regular segment of what are you watching, and then in lieu of talking about news, we're just going to dive into all sorts of horror movie stuff. I was looking at like top 50 of all time, top 10 of the last 3 years, upcoming horror movies that are coming out, and just kind of discuss some of the stuff going on there. It actually would love to hear from you guys in the chat about some of your opinions on these guys coming up. So I'll be checking that periodically. Again, thanks for the heads up on the audio. We could hear each other just fine.
Yeah, we were good on it, but thanks for the heads up because I had no idea that they couldn't hear us.
Yeah, I mean, us being able to hear each other, that's important, but I guess some people would debate that that's probably not the most important.
I think they're equally important, though. I would say that.
Yeah, granted, if we were live and we couldn't hear each other, that'd be pretty fucking worthless too.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we were just talking over each other, I don't think that'd make a very interesting show either. So
trying to read each other's fucking lips the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Munchie.
My dad can read lips. Did I ever tell you this? My dad's deaf.
No.
Yeah, so my dad's deaf, but he's like legally deaf, so he does hear a little bit, but like, not a lot, and he doesn't do sign language or anything like that. So
is he eerily good at reading mouths?
Lips?
Yeah, lips.
That's how. I mean, he like nobody even knows my dad's deaf, except for a lot of people think my dad's an ass because he like won't respond if people say something to him. It's like you're like, no, he's not being an ass. He's just deaf.
So I don't know ASL, but I like know the alphabet, which is not a convenient way to communicate with people.
I love you.
Good.
And then I really love you. I think that's the only thing I know.
Good. See, I didn't know I really love you. I mean, I knew I really love you, but I didn't know the hand sign.
You know that my uncle does sign language. So my uncle, does works with the school for the deaf, works with deaf kids. Well, he used to.
I'm like real proficient in stacking.
Huh?
I said I'm like real proficient in stacking and throwing my sets up.
Is that what you are? Sort of like that.
Yeah. This is kind of on the same topic. I went and saw the movie Late 90s last night.
Late 90s? Is that the sequel to mid 90s?
Yeah, it's the follow-up. A lot of people didn't realize that it came out at the same time. Man, I went and saw mid 90s last night. We'll edit that out in post. So I went and saw mid 90s last night. For those of you guys that don't know, it was written and directed by the fat kid from Superbad.
Is he still fat, or do you go back to being skinny, or do you go back to being fat?
Oh, he's skinny as fuck. He's super skinny, and he's like aloof now. Like he has moved from comedic actor to director. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's strange. I saw him on one of the late night shows, and I swore he was like real fucked up. But I think that's part of the deal.
It's just to be all fucked up. That's kind of just his MO.
Well, if you're a director, I think you've just got to be weird. Maybe he's not on drugs and he just seems like I don't know. Is Tim Burton on drugs, or is he just really fucking eccentric?
No, I think he's just. I don't even think he's that eccentric. I think he's one of those guys where being eccentric is his image, so he's eccentric in that sense.
You think he's playing it up a little bit? Is that what you're saying? You
100%.
think Tim Burton's not an authentic weirdo?
No, that's the same thing as like fucking Lil Wayne. I'm a Martian. I'm a weirdo. No, you're not that weird. That's your fucking image, dude.
Hold up, though, dude. Tim Burton and Helena Bonham Carter are divorced. They live in two separate houses, and they have an underground tunnel connecting the two of them.
Yeah, they sound like every little goth kid I've ever fucking met. They're like, look how cool this is. We're so different, except for you're like all your other little friends.
Meet me in
That's what
my
they are.
dungeon.
Yeah,
All
it's like,
right.
no, they're. I don't buy into half that shit. I've known some weirdos, and weirdos don't talk about how weird they are. It's like crazy people. If someone says they're crazy, then they're not crazy because then they know they're crazy. It's that catch-22. Weirdos don't know they're weird.
I think I'm self-aware and crazy at the same time.
No, you can't be. You just don't-
I guess yeah, that's the very definition of crazy is not no, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, so mid 90s was really fucking good. Like I was 13 in 1993. So this movie or in 1995 I was 13. So this movie like it felt really specific to growing up. And what was funny is I was shit at skateboarding. So the way that I ingratiated myself into that scene was through punk rock and like pop punk and surfer punk and, Pennywise and Screeching Weasels and old Blink 182 and AFI and like all of the stuff that was out right at that time. And I had a friend named Shane who's like one of my really good buds. He's a great guitar player, but he specifically reminded me so much of the lead character in this movie. So I know that if you're like a 35-year-old white dude that was into the skating scene and obsessed with 90s hip hop, then you're definitely like this movie, but I don't know like what percentage of people that is.
I think that's a lot in that age group.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know.
So
Like, I
what
think
about
that's a
you,
huge-
man?
I have just been not even watching anything. I've been playing Red Dead Redemption non-fucking stop. That's my um, thing. I still think the controls are pretty shitty,
Mm-hmm.
but despite that, it's I don't see how it doesn't make everyone's game of the year list. It reminds me a lot of like Skyrim. Like there's a lot of that in it. It's a lot of it almost seems borderline simulation at point in times, but the amount of care that they put into this game is unreal. Like you'll run into someone random on the street and you'll do a side quest or you'll do a mission and they'll like walk off. And if you're a weirdo like me, you can actually follow them and they'll like go finish up their mission and doing whatever you did. Like you told this guy that his wife died. You told him where she died. And I was like, hey, this guy, it's like mission complete. And the guy walks off. I'm like, I'm going to follow him. So I follow him for like 40 minutes.
Does he go
And
home?
he goes and finds his wife's body, picks it up, starts crying and saying how sad he is that she's gone.
Oh,
like it's this
shit.
whole like enacted scene that no one would see unless you're a weirdo like me who followed those.
Yeah, I can see myself doing a bit of that. That sounds really cool. Just like living in the world, I think is one of the things that I appreciate so much about, what they're doing with this new game.
That's my thing is like I keep getting sidetracked. I'm not that far into the story because I'm like, oh, this person needs help, or oh, like I did a home robbery because you're playing the bad guys in this one, so you're on the run and everything. So I found this person gave me a clue that there was this house with some rich people, so I took one of my other guys. We went in, and it didn't feel like a side mission. Like it was well structured and felt like a legitimate mission in most games.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with it. I'm very impressed.
Did you watch the first 4 episodes of Castlevania on Netflix?
I think I watched the first 2 when it came out.
You weren't into it.
No, I hated it.
What? See, at first, the first episode, I was like, man, this is cool. I don't really love the animation style. It doesn't feel like Castlevania. But then as it starts to settle into Simon Belmont's storyline, it started to really feel like the game to me. And this second season is fucking awesome, dude.
I heard the second's much better. For me, it just did that thing that a lot of American anime does, where it's faux anime, where it's like moving at this weird breakneck speed, and to where I was like, I don't have any attachment to any of these fucking characters.
Sure.
I don't care where they're going. Like it was just like boom, boom, boom. Oh, this person died, and this is happening. And you're like, okay, just tell me, like, give me a character that I can latch onto. I think I only watched like the first 2 episodes, though. To be fair.
What's another American produced anime in that same similar vein that you're saying where the pacing's different?
Well, a lot of the ones that like
I thought
like
about
DC has
Samurai
done
Jack,
that are-
Samurai Jack first. Oh yeah, the DC ones.
and then why can I not think of it? It's the one that the guy who plays Samuel Jackson does Samurai
Afro
something.
Samurai, yeah.
Yeah, that's another one that falls right into that same vein where I'm like, it's like faux anime. It doesn't really have the same appeal to me that real anime has.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm happy it exists. Plus, I think Castlevania's who's it written by? Like, it's
Adi
written by some,
Shankar.
huh?
Adi Shankar.
No, there's somebody either a producer or something, a comic book artist, or not comic book, a guy who writes comics. Is it Garth Ennis?
Okay, that
Uh,
is somebody.
yeah, there's somebody who's like, I cannot think of it, but I think it might be Garth Ennis that is like a phenomenal comic book author that is actually producing it and working on it. So that was actually, I'm not a Castlevania fan, so that's what made me excited about it,
Mm.
was knowing he was attached to it, because like everything he touches is just like phenomenal. But it just didn't grab me.
That's sort of in the horror vein, and just backpedal, dude. We were talking about Tim Burton a minute ago. He's one of these interesting directors that, well, one of these interesting directors that started out super fucking strong as far as I'm concerned, and then just kind of deteriorated over the years, got a victim of his own success, and kind of started to feel like he was parodying his own movies. But he's always had a very horror aesthetic, visual style, and then this real quirky sense of humor and sensibility about his movies. And I think that a lot of his shit is like perfect for Halloween time, whether it be Beetlejuice, even the '89 Batman, or Sleepy Hollow. There's so many of these movies that I think work really well. Were you ever a fan of Tim Burton stuff?
So there's a couple of them. I love Batman Returns is
It's great.
probably my favorite Batman movie.
Weird.
I think it's brilliant. And then, of course, '89 Batman's good as well. I do like Sleepy Hollow, which I think is one of his more underrated films. Um, and then everything else after that, I kind of get over his shtick pretty quickly. I like him better as a producer. I always say his best films are films that he didn't actually direct.
Like Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, Nightmare Before Christmas. What was the Nines or whatever?
I
Did you
didn't
ever
see
watch
that, but I'm familiar. That was Bekmenetov, the guy that did Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but he also did Night and Day Watch.
And he did I think Wanted too, didn't he direct that?
That's his. Yep, that's right. That's right.
Uh, yeah, that movie's awesome. I loved that movie. I thought it was a phenomenal film. But like that's kind of more where I like him, because I do think his flair and all that, and his design philosophy is pretty interesting. I just think it's better when he passes that on to someone who can then put their own spin on it. I think he kind of works better that way. I think there's a lot of people like that. Like, I'll use another one. James Gunn is interesting. When Guardians of the Galaxy 1, they gave James Gunn a script. He put his James Gunn spin on it. It was interesting. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, they were like, hey, you write the script, you do everything. And Guardians of the Galaxy 2 kind of failed. To me, I put Tim Burton in that same vein. If you give Tim Burton too much control, he kind of loses his mind, and it doesn't work for me.
Hey, what's up, Amy? I see you in there. Hope you have a good Halloween tonight. Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at his IMDb page right now, and starting in 1984, he did that stop motion short for Frankenweenie, which is really fucking cool. I didn't see it till years later. It's actually on YouTube. I could probably post a link to it. Pee-wee's Big Adventure. You into that?
I forgot he did Pee-wee. Yeah.
That's a good one. Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhand, Batman Returns, Ed Wood. Did you see Ed Wood?
Never saw Ed Wood.
So good. So good. So weird. I mean, it's very quirky. It definitely has Tim Burton style, but it was a much more stripped down, less supernatural and shit. I mean, it is ultimately a biopic, but it's just the way that he approached it was really fucking cool and weird. I even really like Mars Attacks a lot, and then I like Sleepy Hollow a lot, and then I want to say after Big Fish, I barely liked anything he's fucking done. So
I would agree with that. What do you think is his best film?
See, that's a tough one for me, man. I love Beetlejuice. Like, I fucking love Beetlejuice. I also love Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Let me look at this real quick.
For me, mine would be Batman Returns.
That's a good choice. That's a good choice. That is definitely that for those of you guys that don't know that are listening or watching. Tim Burton had a deal with Warner Brothers and with McDonald's to do merchandising, and when they saw Batman Returns, they're just like, we can't fucking do anything with this, and that's why they hired Joel Schumacher afterwards, because Batman Returns is so fucking wonky and weird. They didn't even know how to market such dark characters.
And that's why Michael Keaton didn't come back. He was supposed to come back for the third one.
I did hear that.
Yeah, and then he heard that Tim Burton wasn't attached and that they were changing. He was like, peace, I'm out. That's the only reason I'm here. I would have loved to see what a Two-Face Tim Burton would have been. That would have been fucking brilliant.
So all right, I got to go with Beetlejuice and Ed Wood, I think, and they're kind of embody both different sides of his filmography. I think fucking he just ruined Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, man. I don't know what the fuck he was doing there.
So I was gonna say, what do you think's his worst? Do you think that's it?
I hadn't seen all of them, man, but what is it? Alice in Wonderland was hot garbage.
I'm like, Planet of the Apes was pretty bad too.
Planet of the Apes was real bad. I think that was the first of his like, oh fuck, he just now sold out. We saw it happen.
I saw that in theaters. Well, you know how big of I'm like a huge Planet of the Apes fan.
Yeah.
Like I always say, that's my Star Wars. I was so excited when opening day. I sat like the second to the front row, and I left there, and I had that thing that you do where you want to love something. You're like, no, it was good.
Yeah,
it was good. And then like you think about it a day, and I thought about it a day. Then I went back and saw it again, like 2 or 3 days later, and I walked out and I was like, no, I was right. This is fucking awful.
You got Phantom Menaced.
I really did with it because I just wanted it to be good so bad. So when the new remakes came out, was it Matt Reeves who did the new one?
Mm-hmm.
When he did them, I was like, I walked out there and I was like, I fucking love that movie, and I was like, did I really love it, or did I just? So I went back and saw it again, and I was like, no, I really love this movie.
So we're kind of off the rails here, but what's your favorite of the the new Apes movies?
Oh, I would say the third one. I'd say War is probably the peak of it for me.
It's fucking good, dude. And Woody Harrelson, you cannot go wrong with Woody Harrelson. But I think the one that was the most emotionally affecting to me was not the one that Matt Reeves did, but the one that Rupert Wyatt did with James Franco in it. And I know, like, James Franco was not the big selling point, but Caesar fucking breaking out of prison and, like, turning all the monkeys to his side was epic. That was, like, one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And when he yells, no! And you're just like, what the fuck is going on, dude? That was a really, really good movie.
All three of those, I think, are, like, criminally underrated as a trilogy. Like,
it's
they are
one of the
like,
best.
Solid.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Methodically paced.
Yeah. I think they're just the third one. What I liked about War for me, the favorite is they pretty much shot a concentration camp drama, and they just put apes in it, and they played it so straight. They were like, yeah, we're essentially shooting Schindler's List, but we're gonna just leave it with apes.
Yeah,
and like they directed all the scenes with so much respect that they believed in the ridiculous concept enough to where I was just on board the entire film.
Absolutely. Amy says that Willy Wonka scares her. I don't blame you. That was very pedophile-y vibes that Johnny Depp was putting out in that movie. You said you just got done trick-or-treating. That's great. I will see you at the office tomorrow with all of your Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Thank you very much. What's your favorite candy, Caleb?
Oh, favorite candy... I'm not a huge candy person, but I would probably go Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
Yeah, I'll get high as fuck, and I'll like take Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and then scoop chunky peanut butter onto the top of them and eat that. It's so delicious.
What's the candy that you can't believe people eat?
Fuck, there's a couple of them. For me, it's black licorice. What about you?
Ooh, that's a good one. White chocolate. Anything white chocolate.
White chocolate's nasty too. It's too sweet.
It's fucking disgusting.
Uh-huh. It's not chocolate either. Did you tell me that just a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, it was actually on People Are Terrible. We were talking about foods we hate.
That's right.
I said, yeah, it's like milk and shit. I'm like, you can't call it chocolate, and there's no chocolate in it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So, and then the other ones that are fucked up are those little, like, they're twisted up taffy, and they're in red or they're in orange or black, and they're just like rando, generic fucking candy.
I also hate Whoppers. Like the
Milky Ways
candy.
do suck. Yep.
Yeah. Like, who the fuck eats those?
Whoppers are gross.
Huh?
Whoppers are gross. They like snap in your mouth. They're just like pop, and then they're gross. They're not fucking good. So those are some good ones. Amy says black licorice is from the devil. That is very possible.
I mean, I'm sure we've all done it where you get drunk off Jaeger. Like, who is that's their drink of choice, though? Like, ugh.
That shit is so gross. So gross.
I used to live downtown by this bar, and they would do, like, dollar Jaeger shots or something, like, all the time.
No.
And So I've had more Jaeger than anyone probably should ever have, and it's so fucking gross. Every time I had it, I was like, "Who drinks this?" And I was like, "Me," because it's $1, and it's fucking disgusting.
So, when it comes time for Halloween every year, I'll start looking into list of, must watch movies on Halloween. And I've seen so many of the like critically acclaimed horror movies that I have to dig a little bit deeper to find shit that I just haven't seen a dozen times already. Well, I stumbled across this movie the other day. It was on, I want to say it was on Amazon Prime, and it's called Hell House LLC. Have you and I talked about that yet?
No, but that's so funny that there's a movie with LLC in the title.
So, it's about a group of kind of they coordinate and put together haunted houses. They've been doing it in New York City for a couple of years, and they decide to go to a more rural area because it's cheaper. And they rent this old hotel that unbeknownst to them, has a really dark history of hauntings and shit like that. It's a found footage movie, and what I thought was cool about it is it's more of a mockumentary in that they compile surveillance footage from YouTube videos that were captured inside this house, because the night that Hell House opened on Halloween, only like a couple of tours were able to get through it before some unexplained event happened that left like 15 people dead, including the crew that was putting together Hell House. And then, so that it opens up with that, and then through a series of videos that these kids that were putting together the event, that they've been documenting the whole thing, and through like clips of their surveillance and through what they'd captured on their cell phones, they make a story that kind of recounts the events leading up to this disaster and what happened. And dude, it was fucking creepy. Like, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super good. I watched it when nobody was around, and I was like, man, that was really good. And then I found out, oh, Hell House 2 just came out like a week ago. So I watched Hell House 2, and it was awful. And it made me wonder, like, was the first one really good? Almost exactly what you were saying about Planet of the Apes a moment ago. That I was like, did I fool myself into liking it just because it wasn't super familiar to me? So I went back and I watched Hell House LLC, and I'm telling you, dude, out of like 5 of the primary actors in it, 3 of them are strong, and then the other 2 are like, they're serviceable, but they're not horrible, and then everybody in the second one's bad.
See, that happens way too often, unfortunately, with horror films. I feel like there's just way too many that just the first one's good and the second, like 90% of horror films, it feels like the first one's good and then every other one after it's garbage.
Yeah, and we'll probably dive into a little bit of that, because it's almost like the first entry into each of these slasher franchises are pretty much revered as classics in a lot of senses. I don't think anybody looks at Friday the 13th that way, but a lot of people really look to the Halloween franchise, or the first entrance into the Halloween series, as like a benchmark in horror and shit like that, and it's hard to argue. And then you look at the first A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's a classic movie. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, really fucking good. And then all of the subsequent sequels and follow-ups after that, just they fall off. But of all of those franchises that I just mentioned, like, how would you rank them?
Of all like the slasher flick ones?
So, okay, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 4 of them.
I would say Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, and then Nightmare. Even though Nightmare's probably a little bit better, I just don't like those films.
Okay.
So I'd have to do that. But they're probably, like, if I'm looking at them as like filmmaking, they're probably, well, at least the first one is probably a little bit better than any of the Jason films. It just never resonated with me.
Get that dog a fucked up haircut. Make it look weird. Take a picture. Send it to us on social media. We want to see he says he's got to take his dog for a haircut and he'll be back. Well, we really are. Taking your dog for a haircut on Halloween night, that's not something not something you see every day.
Speaking of like more obscure horror films, have you ever seen The Hamiltons?
No, but if I had to guess, I would say that was that black portrayal of that what was the movie? What am I thinking of? It was like a play.
Oh, you're thinking of, that's Hamilton or whatever.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's close. Okay, there's this S separating these two. What's Hamilton's?
Yeah, no, The Hamiltons is like, I almost don't want to, it's one of those movies that it's a lower budget film. It's about like a serial killer family. That's just like really weird. It's kind of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Okay.
type, but it's one of those ones. It's not amazing until it ends, and then it's brilliant. It's one of those films like you have to watch the whole thing, and by the time it ends, you go, "Oh, that's brilliant." Like I'd love to see someone remake it as a much better shot, better directed film, because the way it ends is just like one of those films that just blew me away.
Holy shit. That's an endorsement. Yeah, I hadn't heard of it. So that's something that I need to kind of look into. Of all the
It's
slasher
real low budget.
franchises, I think I would go Friday the 13th is bottom of the barrel to me. Halloween is next to that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. See, that's not true. Texas Chainsaw Massacre's got to be my last favorite because there's only one good fucking movie the entire franchise. Then Friday the 13th because there's, even if it's not good, it's fucking crazy enough that there's some enjoyable stuff like Jason going to space and Jason X and Jason fighting Freddy. I think my next one is Halloween because the first one is a classic, and then all the ones after that are just fucking boring because at least Friday the 13th had the kills down. Like, they put a lot of effort into creative kills, where Halloween, Michael Myers is just kind of going through the same. He's either choking people or stabbing people or like, it was never a spectacle. Where Friday the 13th, they knew what they were doing. It was plenty of tits, plenty of gore, and the set pieces were the murders. But my favorite of all of them, funny, I think our list is almost opposite, is A Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite of them.
I need to go back and rewatch the first one because I honestly probably haven't seen it in 15 years. Like I saw it and I hated it, and I never went back. I was a teenager. I mean, I might have even been younger. I might have been like 14. So I need to honestly, in all fairness, go back and give it a shot because there's been a lot of movies that I hated and then go back and love. Speaking of like those type of movies, if your favorite, what's your favorite of the? If you had to rank like the Universal monster films, so Mummy,
good one,
Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein, Invisible Man. I think that's all. Oh, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't know where you would fall on all of those.
See, I am a very big fan of the classic Universal monster movies, but very similar to the slasher films. You got a really strong entry and then some bullshit. That said, Bride of Frankenstein, it's a solid fucking movie, so I guess Frankenstein would have to be my first. I mean, Boris Karloff is incredibly iconic as not only Frankenstein's monster, but also the Mummy. So he was definitely very revered. But what's interesting, and a lot of people don't know, well, I guess people that watch these movies know, but like Bela Lugosi played Frankenstein. He played Dracula. Fucking Boris Karloff played both versions. Like they all kind of rotated depending on the movies they were in. Bela Lugosi played Igor in Frankenstein movies. So it's like they all just kind of, it was almost a shared universe before shared universes were a thing. But so, yeah, I think the original Wolfman is probably my next favorite to the original Frankenstein. And then the original Dracula, and then the other ones. I think the Mummy's not all that strong. I think Creature from the Black Lagoon's not all that strong. But the original Wolfman, Frankenstein, and Dracula are all stellar fucking movies.
I would say, well, the number one is my favorite horror film of all time, and that's Wolfman. Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman.
Good answer, man. That's a good one.
I love that film. And then I don't know if you know this, you probably do. You're a horror buff. That was originally written to be where at the end of the movie was supposed to be very obscure, and it was supposed to be like, is he schizophrenic? Is he just a crazy person?
Yeah.
And then they changed it because they figured general audiences wouldn't have understood it. I would have loved to see a movie way back then have that type of plot twist, but I still think it's a very strong movie. I think Lon Chaney Jr. himself probably gives the best performance. Then I would probably go. I might actually go Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's not a good movie, but I love that character. It's one of those things. I think he's such a cool one. Then I would probably go Frankenstein. Frankenstein, I think, is a solid film. I think Boris Karloff's amazing. And you know that like indention he has in his cheek? Do you know he had a fake tooth and he would pop it out and suck his cheek in through that tooth? That's how he got that like his cheek all sunk in, which is kind of a weird fact. And then I would probably go Dracula, and then Invisible Man, and then Mummy. The Mummy's pretty bad.
I forgot about Invisible Man. That's also a good one. And then we also have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I think predates a lot of those. I think that was Lon Chaney, not Junior. No, that was Phantom of the Opera that Lon Chaney was in. predating a lot of the Universal movies. Yeah, those are all good. And if I'm honest, I should probably go back and rewatch a lot of those. It's been quite a while, but that was kind of my gateway into horror movies in general, was this idea of the Universal monsters. I'm sure you and I have actually probably talked about this, but for those of you guys watching or listening, I would go into the library at the elementary school and oh shit, I just not disappeared you. I did this on the last podcast. It sucks. Oh, there you go. You're back. You're back.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that they all have something to offer, and I do think that you're right about Boris Karloff. And another thing, while we're talking about that, Jack Pierce. Shout out to Jack Pierce for all of the almost original fucking monster makeup that was done in all of those movies.
Especially that they're still pretty good, but like when you take in the time that those films came out, like that was just groundbreaking, next level like movie magic.
Yeah, it was. It really set the standard for prosthetics and like what do they call it, like chin builds, nose builds, cheek builds, forehead builds. You know, the latex kind of protrusions or whatever you'll see on a lot of zombie costumes or devil costumes or whatever people wear now. You know.
Before that, I would say actually one of the big people who you got to give credit to was Lon Chaney Sr. because, you know, he did like a lot of his own makeup and stuff. And like he was one of those guys. I mean, it looks ridiculous by even the Universal movie monster standard. But like, again, at the time it came out and considering the actor did all his own makeup and stuff, like he was one of those guys that, in my opinion, is kind of one of the pioneers of like of makeup.
That was a strong place to actually start it. We'll just go fucking way back. After that wave of movies, I don't know, are you familiar with the Hammer versions of the Universal monsters?
I love the Hammer version. I love the Hammer. Especially, I actually think the Hammer version of the Draculas are stronger.
That's Christopher Lee as Dracula, for those of you guys keeping count. And yeah, they're really good. I think what I liked about Hammer is it took the stories that we all knew, but it kind of... obviously it updated it, but what it did is it introduced the exploitation element of it. It introduced the sex and the violence element to these stories that, you know, obviously Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein predate the movies by a lot. And actually, I think Dracula is the most adapted movie of all time. Like, there are more tellings of Dracula than any other story in cinematic history. So that just shows like that story endures. And I really like Christopher Lee's take on Dracula, like you said. But I think they're fun because they're so low budget and they're like, I felt like there was a little bit of prestige to the Universal movies. Maybe it's just because I kind of look at them as classics, but I was watching the Satanic Rites of Dracula the other night and I was just reveling in how bad it is, you know?
I would agree. They're horrible films, but I think the very, very first Christopher Lee one I remembered really, really liking.
It's good.
Again, I haven't seen it since I was like 15, but I remember that one being like a really good, solid film.
There was a Frank Langella Dracula that came out in like 1979. It was like a made-for-TV version of it that was also pretty good.
Never seen that one. I always liked the Hammer design of the Wolfman, though.
Yeah, for sure. And they really made the Wolfman be like animalistic in it, you know? Well, I guess he was in the original. You just didn't see it.
Yeah, and he choked everyone, which I hated in the original. You know, which it makes sense if you go with the original screenplay of like, hey, he wasn't really a wolf, you know, but. And the version of the Hammer werewolf, I thought it was cool. We'll jump ahead a little bit, but we'll come back to this. Is the Hammer version of the Wolfman, to me, you can see heavily influenced Monster Squad's Wolfman.
100%. Yeah, that's a really good point. So what Hammer was a production studio that was out of the UK. I think they were out of Britain specifically, and they did just updated versions of a lot of those movies, which I don't know if the rights had lapsed or just because they were based on, you know, pre-existing material that they didn't have to go through Universal to do that. That's probably the more likely scenario. But like coming into the 60s and 70s, which is when those films were released, there was a whole lot of new movies coming onto the scene. Like, I think to me, it was about halfway through the 60s when modern filmmaking really, not modern filmmaking, but we started to transition into more modern sensibilities and things that audiences today kind of look at as almost like an expectation. So there were movies like Psycho, obviously, but what was the other one where It's like the voyeur. He's a cameraman, and
Oh, Rear Window.
it's not Rear Window, but it's Peeping Tom.
Oh, I've never seen that.
You know, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. It's a movie about a voyeuristic, almost camera director who fucking peeps on women, and towards the end of the movie, like he basically puts like a knife on the end of his camera, and like as he's zooming into the person, he ends up killing him. Anyways, there's the spoiler that you guys were all looking for a movie released May 15th of 1962, but it was kind of a precursor to the slasher in that it was one of the first movies where we got like a POV kill, which means that you're seeing it through the eyes of the killer, you know?
The 60s is one of my personal favorite like eras for horror film. I just think there was so much brilliant stuff that was coming out. I love the Vincent Price era.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Of all of that, like again, probably my number two, man, maybe like number four horror film. One of my favorites though came out this, I want to say, um, 1963, 64, around there. Last Man on Earth, which is unbelievable, based on the book I Am Legend.
I was gonna say it's the Omega Man also.
Yeah, Omega Man. I love Omega Man. I love Last Man on Earth. I do not like the movie I Am Legend.
I don't either. I don't either.
Yeah, I thought it was awful, but that was definitely an interesting time. I'm trying to think of others. Oh, Rosemary's Baby was late 60s.
And that, to me, that's where we really start getting into my sensibilities. Your Roman Polanski's, your William Friedkin's with The Exorcist, a lot of the satanic panic horror movies that kind of came around in the 1970s. And I think that was a really interesting era for horror films because they started to focus more on psychological elements and elements of paranoia and kind of devolving into insanity. Like everybody knows Rosemary's Baby, but what they may not be familiar with is The Tenant, which was part of the Apartment trilogy. They were all three directed by Roman Polanski. I mean, among many, many movies, even like Chinatown and stuff. But he did, what the fuck was the first one called? It was a black and white movie about a girl who was going paranoid in her apartment complex. It's not Insanity, but it's not, it's something really on the nose like that. And it was entry number one into the Apartment trilogy. After that was the Tenant, and then after that was Rosemary's Baby. And essentially, they're all very, very similar. They're about almost urban paranoia and living in such close quarters with strangers who could potentially be fucking weirdos. And like, I live in an apartment complex, so I can relate with that. The Apartment trilogy by Roman Polanski. I can't believe I can't remember what it's called.
And another
Repulsion.
film like in that same vein, like you said, The Exorcist, The Omen. I love the first Omen. I didn't like it. I didn't like the others, but the first one's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Carrie. Carrie by Brian De Palma was pretty good.
I've never been a big Carrie fan. Another one I need to go back to. I haven't seen since I was young. Don't Look Now came out that in the 70s. I believe it was late 70s.
Oh
like
man,
70s.
If you guys haven't seen Don't Look Now, that movie is so goddamn creepy. The ending of it is just shocking.
I didn't see that movie until I was probably about like 20 years old. And it's one of those movies that just blew me away. Like legitimately, it gets up every time. Like it's at least in my top 20. And I know so many people who've never even heard of it, let alone, sit down and actually watched it.
Donald Sutherland was doing really good shit at the time. His version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers was fucking fantastic.
Donald Sutherland was a beast for a while.
He was.
Everything he was good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that version of the very last scene in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, another just really unsettling scene. I don't want to give away Don't Look Now just in case you guys have not seen that, but it sells you on a movie totally different, and it's tragic. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very sad, very dramatic movie, but then it just ends in the most offbeat, unexpected fucking way possible, and that image is forever burned into my head. The raincoat, you know what I mean? And so yeah, that's one that I definitely have gone back and rewatched. And yeah, like right now we're hitting on a lot of those movies that I just really, really liked growing up. Those also in the 1970s is when Italian filmmakers started doing a lot of low budget horror films and exploitation movies. So while while a lot of that stuff was, George A. Romero was doing Night of the Living Dead in the 1960s. We've got Mario Bava, Dario Argento, all of these Italian filmmakers kind of working on movies like Zombie and Demons and kind of rip-offs of the American counterparts, but it really did just kind of make horror a more international thing that previously it might not have been as much before.
Yeah, and I definitely, you brought him up, George A. Romero. The 60s, we had this conversation. I'm mediocre on the first Night of the Living Dead. I respect it for what it did. But for me, Dawn of the Dead is
a good
the quintessential zombie film. Like, to me, that's the top of the zombie film, and everything else pales in comparison by a mile. But like that, yeah, was it 1978? That was one of my favorites of horror films. And you go back, and of course, the Tom Savini prosthetics look pretty bad by today's standard, but there's painted green, but it's just a well thought out film.
It is. It's there's a lot of the socio-political subtext being added to it, and that was something that, in the classic era of horror films, in the golden age, I guess you could call it, horror films were almost more romantic. They were like weird romance stories. I mean, whether you're talking about Frankenstein and the Bride, or whether you're talking about Dracula and Nina, or whether you're talking about Lon Chaney, the Wolfman Talbot. What the fuck was his name? Something Talbot, Larry Talbot, and his longing for this woman that he just wants to be with. And so it was a very romanticized, almost like gothic horror. And then once we started kind of moving into this different era, it became all like they started using it to draw parallels with what was going on in the real world. And what's interesting about that is the difference between intent and then the way that it's received by audience. Like George A. Romero would tell you to this day, like, he wasn't trying to make a statement about race when he cast what's his ass? Man, I'm not gonna be able to remember it. I need to look it up. But from Night of the Living Dead, he was like, no, that was just, he was the best actor that was available for the job, and I hired him. I wasn't really trying to say anything about race with it, and I think that that's really fascinating, especially considering, like, true to a lot of zombie movies, the true threat isn't the zombies at all. The people are way more fucking awful than the zombies are.
Well, that's why like even things like, and you see that still established today, like Walking Dead, which Robert Kirkman will say is like set in George A. Romero's universe, just unofficially.
Sure.
And that is like, I've heard some people going, well, especially about the newer seasons, well, it's not really about the zombies anymore. I'm like, because it's a zombie film. Zombie films should never be about the zombies. You should be able to take them out and replace them with any natural disaster, and it should still be the same movie. That's how I view zombie films.
Yeah.
They're just icing on the cake. The cake itself is the human interaction and showing that people are the real monsters.
Duane Jones is the name of that actor. I just wanted to throw that out there. Actually, Night of the Living Dead, the 90s version, stars Tony Todd, and he went on to do a bunch of really good shit. But yeah, Duane Jones, he was really good in the original Night of the Living Dead, and they did slightly tweak. Tom Savini directed the 90s version. He actually kind of tweaked the ending to make it more of a socio-political statement, and leaned into the fact that they were almost like what do you call they were all hillbillies that were going around and just fucking cleaning places out. I can't think of the right word that I was trying to use for it, but yeah. So we've covered up kind of through the 70s. At the very tail end, go ahead.
One, I was to say, there's one you better be remembering. We got to
go. I overlooked it
last year.
What is? Is it The Exorcist?
No, 1979 Alien.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, that's a good one.
You cannot forget that. That's such a phenomenal film. I think wrongly gets categorized as a sci-fi film. It is a horror film that is set in space, just like the taglines always have said, it's a horror film first, sci-fi second.
So why?
Why would I say it's a horror film? Because just the way it's shot, the way it's directed, you could take Alien and it could be about any sort of monster, and it could be set on a submarine, and it wouldn't change that movie at all. You could have it about a creature in a submarine, and it would not change that film at all. Only the setting is horror film. I would say Aliens is a sci-fi film, 100%. But Alien itself is a horror film.
I agree. I think that what really classifies the first Alien as a horror film is, as you said, and this isn't something I came up with, but it's almost like in a gothic horror film, people get trapped in a castle and they can't leave and they get haunted and people die and all of that kind of stuff. Well, why can't they get out of the house? Well, because some ghost magically locked the doors or some shit. It doesn't. Maybe they're obsessed with staying and they have some sort of personal interest invested in it, or they're gonna stay through the night to win money, like House on Haunted Hill, like those Vincent Price movies. But in Alien, you can't get off the ship because gonna just float away into the fucking abyss. So you're trapped in this haunted house, and as you said, the alien is, as Ridley Scott refers to him, as a dragon. It's a monster. It's a demon. It doesn't have to be an alien. And like you said, the way it's shot is very much a horror film. It's not focusing on alien technology or communicating or their civilization or anything that you'd see in like a Star Trek show or something like that. It's very much just focused on this crew trying to survive being attacked by this mysterious monster that you don't even see for 2/3 of the movie, which is one of the greatest fucking designs of a monster in a movie ever, because it's got vaguely humanoid appearance, but then it's also so foreign, you know?
Oh, that's one of the greatest. That H.R. Geiger design is just unreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think the first film, because of budget restrictions and all that, is the strongest, because that is such a terrifying design that panning across it real quick and just getting a silhouette of it or something, and with those shiny silver teeth, is so effective at being a horror film. And the fact that he's black and blends in so well with shadows anyway, there are some like genuinely, like, I don't think of them as terrifying now, but like when you really look at it as like true horror film terrifying shots in that.
Yeah, I feel like when we talk about subtext in horror movies, it's got to be addressed that what this movie did was introduced a very psychosexual element into it. Like, it's all of this fear of sex and penetration and fucking phallic symbols and vagina. Like, the underside of a face hugger is a straight up pussy.
I have a funny story about a face hugger that it's this is so my friend, I won't say his name, but he was drunk, and he's a gay gentleman. He was telling me, I don't know why, I'm never going to need to know how to do this, but he was telling me how to properly give a blowjob because he was drunk. And he goes, you just shove it all the way down your throat right before it comes. I was like, oh my God, that sounds like a face hugger. That sounds fucking terrifying.
Oh no. What else was going on at that time? There was just now something that I felt like, man, I really should have touched on that. Fuck, we'll probably have to circle back around to it. But when you said like you should have thought about this movie from the
70s, I'm googling. Fuck. Well, Phantasm. I never was a Phantasm fan, but that was 70s.
Don Coscarelli. That's a really good fucking movie. I mean, he was like 24 when he directed that first film, which is wild. Like, I think he's one of the youngest directors to ever make a movie like that. And Phantasm is one of those movies that, for whatever reason, it has just survived in the zeitgeist. They've just now made a movie called Phantasm Ravager fucking 2 years ago, you know? And it's the same guy who's always played the tall man. And that's a movie to me that is like a great Halloween watch, but it's not a good movie. It's just like, it's a cool atmosphere.
One thing before we get out of the 70s we do have to address is like the I Spit on Your Grave, Last House on the Left, stuff like that was a big time of that era.
Really good point. That really did kick off the exploitation genre, and Wes Craven's one that we'll come back to through several decades because he managed to kind of reinvent the genre in multiple times. But he came out with Last House on the Left, which was by far from the first exploitation movie, but it really did kind of cause a mainstream resurgence or insurgence of these kind of movies. The rape revenge genre was kind of born out of that. Movies like I Spit on Your Grave and stuff. What did you think about the original Last House on the Left?
They're a little like, they make me feel uncomfortable, especially like I Spit on Your Grave really makes me feel uncomfortable because like the rape scene is just too much for me in that. It's a little, it's a little intense for me. I always say I can watch anything in film. Rape really bothers me. It's one of those things I really have a hard time with.
So, is there a catharsis for you though? Like, obviously, the brutality depicted against the female character is always going to make you sympathize with her, being able to display her vulnerability in that way where she's like at her most lowest possible as far as like the power structure goes. They've been like demeaned and broken down as far as they can go. So I feel like there's always a catharsis, but I don't know if it's earned. It's like I love seeing chicks get put through the ringer in horror movies so that they can kick ass in the third act, and that's something that it comes up time and time and time again. Are these movies sexist, or is it like empowering? And I think with the rape revenge genre, what happened is with something like Last House on the Left, there's a very visceral response to it, and it feels like Wes Craven very much understands the balance of the two and doesn't want to portray violence as a positive thing where like the parents become complicit in Last House on the Left, and it doesn't make you feel good about violence. You see the effects that violence has on people. Where I Spit on Your Grave was an exploitation movie. It relishes in the rape. It's an extended rape scene. It spends too much time on that shit for you to feel good about watching it. But then there is also like, oh, she just came back and fucked those people up. I mean, is that a cheap tactic? Do you feel like you could still get that impact without showing the rape?
I think you could show it, but not like they seem to dwell on that for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was
like,
a long fucking scene.
Film.
Yeah.
Even in the remake of I Spit on Your Grave is like fucking brutal. It's like even longer. It's like a fucking 40-minute rape scene. And it's too much for me.
Jesus Christ.
I feel like it's a tactic. I think it's also the same thing that I feel like certain directors like Takashi Miike does in Japanese stuff where it's shock appeal. They're just going for shock appeal. Like, look, can you show we did that? Just to kind of, it's essentially the movie version of clickbait, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't, for me, that stuff doesn't resonate with me.
Did you see Revenge? It just came out like 2016 or 2017.
No.
It's a rape revenge movie. Exploitation, grindhouse as fuck, but it was written and directed by a woman, and it's a unique take on the tried and true formula. But one of the really clever things that it did is just totally subvert it and not show that scene. It shows her brutalized, but it doesn't actually show the rape. It shows them afterwards like, oh, she's gonna go tell on us. So they basically just try to get rid of her to prevent her from being able to go and jeopardize their careers, their families, their relationships outside of it. But it was really fucking cool, and it proved to me that you don't have to necessarily linger on that to give it that same sensation. But that kind of exploitation thing became so big in the 1970s that we got the insurgence or the boom of the cannibal genre, whether it be Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal...
Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah. And I really think that... the sensationalism surrounding those exploitation movies is a lot more interesting than the movies themselves. I've seen Cannibal Holocaust like 2 or 3 times, and I just think it's fucking reprehensible.
I've never actually seen it.
It's hard to watch, man. It's hard to watch, and it's like it kind of touches on colonialism, which I think is kind of fascinating. You know, it's these kind of well-to-do filmmakers from America going into the Amazon and exploiting the indigenous peoples, trying to create a narrative around the way that cannibals are and how they're these primitive things. And it ends up that the crew has to basically manipulate the situation, similar to what Jake Gyllenhaal was doing in Nightcrawler. They would create scenarios that force these people to act certain ways. It's real fucked up, and all of that's fine. Like, I've watched so many horror movies, I'm desensitized to it, but one of the things that I found problematic about it is that it graphically depicts the murder of like 4 different animals on screen. And then, like, what kind of a pussy am I, though? Because I'm going to probably eat chicken or beef or something for dinner tonight. So is it different to show a turtle get killed than it is to fucking eat a steak?
No.
Yeah, right.
Right.
No. I feel you.
No, I'm one of those people. Give me a turtle, I'll cook that shit right now. I'll fucking gut it and throw it on there and eat it.
And they did say the people ate it, you know, for food. But Cannibal Holocaust, the filmmaker was actually picked up by the Italian police. They took him to court. He had to recreate some of the actual special effects scenes from the movie to prove that it wasn't a snuff film.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. That's what the behind the scenes story of Cannibal Holocaust is fucking crazy, because there's an impalement scene of a native girl in it, that they thought the girl was dead, and then plus everybody had signed contracts from the filmmaker saying they could not make public appearances after the release of the movie to further create the illusion that this shit was actually a documentary, similar to what they do later with the Blair Witch Project. So yeah, anyways, bunch of 70s exploitation movies, bunch of grindhouse, just smut, basically. I like some of it. It's almost like a endurance challenge, like the Faces of Death movies, the Mondo films, all that shit was the 1970s. But John Carpenter came onto the scene in 1978, and he gave us Halloween, which, despite the fact that people will point to Peeping Tom and people will point to Psycho as some of the original slasher films, it really was Halloween that set the template moving forward.
Yeah, I would say Halloween actually is a perfect segue into the 80s, because
Yeah.
to me, Halloween was the birth of the 80s
Absolutely.
horror film.
What do you think about the original Halloween?
I absolutely love it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's an actual well-made film, not just a well-made horror film. It's one of those ones. I even think Halloween 1 and 2, I think are really well done.
I like 2 also. That's a controversial opinion, apparently.
Since when? I don't know when that thing has happened. Everyone in our age group loves Halloween 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I've never heard that until recently, until the internet. Apparently we all decided we don't like 2, even though the last 30 years we all were in agreement.
Well, and it was a Carpenter movie. It felt like the true successor to the first film, and none of the other ones were able to recapture that feeling. And I agree with you. I think what Carpenter did super well, and the credit probably needs to go a lot to the cinematographer, because a lot of those tracking shots and shit from the beginning of Halloween are so good and so iconic, and being able to see it through Michael's perspective and the way he's just kind of stalking these girls. The weakest element of the original Halloween is Laurie's best friend. I can't remember what her name is right now, but she is fucking the worst, dude. She is so bad.
Yeah, and then I do think you're right. I would say there's other things that we would say were the first slasher film, but to me that is, and that completely leads into the 80s with, was it 1980 Friday the 13th came out, or 1981, somewhere around there? Mm-hmm. And that kind of, with those two combined, it just hit the ground running.
So Friday the 13th was produced by Sean Cunningham. Sean Cunningham saw the success of the movie Halloween, and he basically said, we need to buy a fucking holiday and we need to make a movie around it. So what he did is he bought a space in, I don't have all this shit in front of me right now. I want to say it was Variety magazine. It was a big publication. He bought a slot in it, and it said the most terrifying movie ever, Friday the 13th. Posted an ad in it to generate buzz. Didn't have a script, didn't have a synopsis, didn't have shit. And once he sold that spot and was able to start gauging the interest in it, he was able to hire people retroactively and bring this thing together. So Friday the 13th is a movie built around the title Friday the 13th, because Halloween was a huge success, and you can't make a horror movie called Black Christmas. Oh wait, yeah, they did. What do you think about the original Friday the 13th?
I think it's a bad movie. I actually think number 2 is better than number 1.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. The first Friday the 13th, you guys have heard it a fucking million times. It's not a Jason movie. Jason's mom's the killer in it. Funny thing is, dude, before going back and rewatching it, I mean, it's been several years now, but as a kid, I remembered it being the old lady from Goonies and Throw Mama from a Train as Jason's mom.
I wish dope. It was. That'd be a much better movie.
It would. No shit. So yeah, the second one introduces Jason. The first one though is like a giallo film. It reminds me very much of like Deep Red or Tenebrae or Psycho, where it's another psychosexual exploration about and there's some Freudian shit going on. I mean, I think what's interesting, the slasher film just consistently puts out this iconography that represents some repressed sexual shit. I know you've heard it before, but it's always like penetration is always like the preferred method of murder. You never see a slasher killer shoot somebody. They're always stabbing them with something mildly phallical while they're in the middle of sex or doing drugs or like whatever they can be seen as transgression, they get punished for. And in a lot of ways, people have said the slasher genre is the most conservative genre of filmmaking ever. Do you subscribe to that?
No. I don't think it is by any stretch. I think again, I think some of these things are a little more read into than they need to be.
Yeah.
I think the reason people are stabbed is because it's a lot more brutal and up close than shooting
Yeah.
someone is, and it's a lot more horrifying for that reason. There is totally not totally off subject, but there is a film. I was trying to Google it right now. Cannot remember the name of it. It's from the Masters of Horror thing. I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
find the name. Did you ever see the Masters of Horror series?
Are you talking about Burnt Ashes from Masters of Horror?
No,
Okay.
but I was just thinking it's slasher film. I'm googling it. It's the one about a a guy who's a hitchhiker and a truck driver. Um, and the truck driver's a serial killer, and the hitchhiker is a serial
Oh,
killer,
okay.
and they both pick up each other. I just think it's a cool concept.
That
Pick
is a
Me
cool
Up. That's the
concept.
name of it.
Let's see, because I saw The Hitcher with Rutger Hauer in it, and that's fucking badass.
That is a great movie, criminally underrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good one. God, that scene with the iconic scene at the end with the ropes and it's fucked up. It's a pretty fucked up one. So yeah, and so we had Halloween, Friday the 13th. They're cranking out sequels. They're steady doing their thing, and then Wes Craven steps into the picture, the guy that did Last House on the Left, which really kind of caused the birth of this movement of exploitation movies. And he's like, wow, these slasher things are really big right now. Let me try to approach it from a different angle. And he started kind of doing research. Wes Craven was a fucking scholarly dude. It's funny, for those of you guys who don't know, he started shooting softcore porn and porn movies, but he was also like a professor at a university that taught, I don't want to say it wrong, but he was a professor, real smart dude, and he was studying these cases over in Thailand or the Philippines, where there was a couple men so terrified to go to sleep, they swore they were going to die in their sleep, and then they went to sleep, and lo and behold, they actually did die. So he was kind of trying to explore that phenomenon, and the thing about sleep is it's inevitable. The thing about Jason is he's inevitable. Like, the girl's running through the woods and she trips and falls, and he's still slowly stalking after her, pursuing her, but eventually he's gonna fucking catch her. And that's the thing that I thought was clever about A Nightmare on Elm Street, is there is this inevitability of sleep. It's part of our biology. We can't go without it. So no matter how many no-dos or little caffeine pills you take to try and avoid it, eventually sleep's gonna catch you. So I thought that the way that he took the masked personalityless killer and turned him into a mythological boogeyman, somebody that did have a personality, somebody that wasn't being sold by this mask, but actually by his own face and his own motives and stuff. I thought it was really clever, and I thought that they did it really fucking well in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. So of the three that we mentioned, I think A Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite of the first entries into the movies.
I need to definitely go back and watch it. It's been so long since I've seen it. But one thing I will give, that combined with another film from the 80s, I think really kind of didn't birth, because I would say Abbott and Costello birthed the horror comedy genre, but I would say influenced it was definitely Nightmare on Elm Street, because there's definitely, Freddy as himself does have a lot of humor in this character. But combine that with another film that came out in the 80s that kind of launched it was American Werewolf in London.
Oh yeah, that's a great movie.
That movie is like, just, it blows my mind how amazing that film is. Every time I watch it, it's just as good as the first time I saw it. And then led into Evil Dead 2 specifically, to me, really more leaned into horror, into comedy. But that was another trend that you started to see, and even other films in the 80s, such as Lost Boys, and that wasn't necessarily a horror comedy, but they still had a lot of comedy in it.
Yeah, and I love those movies. You and I talked about Killer Clowns from Outer Space the other day. That the horror comedy genre came, like you said, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 was a big one. And when people talk about Evil Dead, they always say Evil Dead, but the first Evil Dead is not good. It's so low budget and it's weak. And I actually saw the short film that it was based on, and it's also just so lo-fi, so low budget, and that's fine. I can respect an independent movie, and I think what Raimi was able to do with the limited budget he had is really fucking impressive. But that scene where Ash is freaking out and all of the clocks start going off and the fucking deer head starts laughing. Yes. He's like pumping the shotgun. It's like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
It's brilliant. So that movie, I was actually shown that very, very young. I actually was not my first Evil Dead film. My first Evil Dead film was Army of
Army of
Darkness.
Darkness,
I
of
saw it,
course.
yeah, I saw it actually in theaters. I saw it when at a drive-through theater with my grandpa. I was a little kid at the time it came out, and I thought it was the scariest fucking thing I'd ever seen. Now going back, I don't
Houston,
know how.
happy birthday, bro. Happy birthday. And happy Halloween is what I meant to say. We got a couple people in the chat. He said, Houston said, happy Halloween, Caleb. Venice
Happy
Beef
Halloween.
says Halloween 2 is better than the new one. Ooh, that's controversial. What do you guys think about Silent Night, Deadly Night? I think that's a Christmas movie, but I do also think it's pretty fucking cool. I like Black Christmas, I think, a little bit better. Did you see the Silent Night, Deadly Night?
Which I'm gonna have to Google a picture of this. This one, I know I've heard it. I probably have seen it. I think I've seen every goddamn film at this point. But
It's so crazy. I want to say that when I was reading into it, there were like close to 300 slasher movies that came out in the 1980s. So if you missed it, I don't blame you. There's a whole bunch of them out there.
Oh yes, this is the one where the covers his hand with the axe out of the chimney.
And so it was
Apparently
also something similar to Halloween. Like he saw his mother murdered by Santa Claus in front of him when he was a kid or some shit. I can't exactly remember. It's been a while, but I remember liking it. He said 1984 is when it came out.
Did you see? That reminds me, it's a newer film. But did you see a Christmas Horror Story or something like that came out? It had it's like a anthology series. It has well, I can't think of his name, Captain Kirk,
Shatner
in it. Shatner, and he's like it's like literally like 2 years ago.
No.
I think it's called A Christmas Horror Story. It's garbage B movie schlock and has a surprisingly amazing ending. You get to see Santa fight zombie elves and
nice.
Krampus at the end.
Nice. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so another like kind of knockoff slasher movie that I liked, and I don't know how many of you guys have even heard of Slaughter High. Did you ever see that one?
I've seen Slaughter High years ago. I couldn't even tell you what it's about.
It's stupid. It's stupid. There's like a nerdy guy who gets acid dumped on him by a bunch of bully teenagers when he's at school, and then for some reason, they end up back in the high school when it's like condemned, and he's hunting them all down and killing them. He wears a jester mask.
Have you ever seen Dead Heat?
I don't think so.
It's Dead Heat is, why can I not think of his name? It's fucking brilliant. It's awful, but it's amazing. So Dead Heat is a zombie like cop film from the 80s. Dead Heat. It's a horror comedy, 1988. I cannot think of his name. Like it's Cass. Why can I not think of this guy's name? As soon as I say it, you're gonna be like, Joe Piscopo is in it.
Oh, for real? No, I want to go see that now. Houston,
and I think
let me know how the haunted house went this year, man. I've been curious about that. And also, check out Hell House LLC if you hadn't seen it. My buddy Houston, he's a collaborator. I've worked with him for a long time doing podcasts and stuff, and he's a Halloween nut, dude. He does a haunted house every year, like a haunted hayride and forest tour for the church that he goes to. So they do like a big production every year, and I don't think they actually run it on Halloween night, but I've been kind of wanting to know how that went.
I'm going to show you. Just this is for you more than anything. You need to watch this movie, Jeremy.
Yeah, I do.
It's fucking awful. It says you can't keep a good cop dead. That's the tagline. It's about a guy and his partner comes back to life as a zombie.
Man, why haven't I? So which one ends up being no? Don't I see it? I'm gonna watch that shit. Victoria is supposed to be picking out a classic horror movie for us to watch tonight as we speak, so I'm kind of curious to see what she comes up with. I swear to God, I have a really strong feeling it's going to be Hocus Pocus, which does not fit into that category.
I hate Hocus Pocus. I'm a Hocus Pocus hater.
It's fucking stupid. I don't know. You ever seen Halloween Town?
Yeah, it's also stupid.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's like, why are all these things fucking cool? Like the shit that was lame when I was a kid, for some reason everybody's got fond memories of it. Maybe I'm older than some of the people, but I feel like this year everybody's been talking about Halloween Town and Hocus Pocus for Halloween, and it's like
it's the same thing that I bitch about. It's just okay. You know, I always bitch about nostalgia goggles.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what it is. It's just you and me don't have those on because we're too old.
Yeah.
So we look back and those are fucking stupid.
Yeah. I was watching real horror movies, people. Ernest Scared
Even when I was
Stupid.
a little kid, like I didn't watch no pussy shit.
Right, right. And you brought up Lost Boys, man. Like I love the 1980s horror movies and the aesthetic of them then, but Lost Boys is just incredibly cool. It is able to balance a couple of different tones with it. I think that it was like this very glam rock fucking look at. I mean, it was updating of vampires, and actually, that's Joel Schumacher, and one of his stronger movies. Going back and watching it, like when you see the greased up saxophone guy, you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely a Joel Schumacher movie.
I I was getting my hair cut last Saturday, and I had a different guy cut it at the same shop, and it was Sunday, and he was actually he was cutting my wife's hair, and he was like doing a nice fade because my wife has her hair short, and this song comes on, and I'm like, I asked the dude, he's this older punk rock guy, and I'm like, what the hell is this song? I've heard it before, and he's like, he names the band, and I was like, I have no idea. He goes, have you seen the Lost Boys? And sure as shit, it's a song from the Lost Boys.
Oh, Cry Little Sister. Is that the one? Yeah, that shit is so good. That song is so good.
I heard it. I was like, what? Like instantly, I was like, I know the song. And he was like, oh yeah, you probably. I'm like, I literally, and he's like, Lost Boys. I was like, that's it.
100%. Yeah, there was another one called Fright Night that came out. I want to say like right there at that same little bit of time. It starred Chris Sarandon, who went on to voice Jack Skellington. He was in Child's Play. It had Marcy Darcy from fucking Married with Children in it. It's a good little vampire story. It definitely uses elements of Rear Window in it.
Roddy McDowall, right?
Yeah. Matter of fact, that's the one. It's good, right?
Yeah, it's a great film. I never saw the remake, even though it was shot like right up the street from my parents.
Oh yeah, you told me that. And dude, to be honest, it's pretty good. It's nowhere near as good, but Colin Farrell turns in a pretty good performance as Jerry, and I love Anton Yelchin, so I think it's worth a watch. It's not a great movie, but I definitely thought it was a pretty solid remake that does some shit different. But yeah, I love vampire movies. That's like one of my favorites. But American Werewolf in London is also just a really, really strong entry. Unpopular opinion, I actually like American Werewolf in Paris pretty good.
I didn't like it, but again, haven't seen it in years. I hated it, but I was also such a fanboy of the original.
Right.
It could have been me just being a fanboy.
And interestingly enough, the first one I saw was American Werewolf in Paris, and it had like Bush on the soundtrack. It was like very 90s, and as a kid, I was probably, 14 or 15 when it came out. I thought it was fucking super cool. Going back and watching it now, like, it just don't hold up. The special effects look garbage. When you look at American Werewolf in London as like the standard for what fucking werewolf transformation should look like, and then everything that CG afterwards looks so bad. Did you see The Howling?
I love The Howling. I think American Werewolf is stronger, but I still love The Howling.
Rick Baker did both of those werewolf transformations in the same year, and two of the most revered and well-done werewolf transformations of all time, and dramatically different looking werewolves. The thing that I always had a prejudice against, and this is stupid, this is horror movie fan bullshit, but the thing I always had a problem with American Werewolf in London is that he was not bipedal, and he did not look like the werewolves that I liked.
Yeah, so he was on all fours. He was more of a wolf.
Yes, and so do you care about that? Because, okay, so there's this movie called Wolfen, and it's about Native Americans that are shapeshifters that are able to turn into wolves, and it's a werewolf movie. We've got The Howling, which is the bipedal kind of wolf snout monsters, and then we've got the walk on all four werewolves, and then we've got the wolf man style werewolves. Like, what do you have a favorite of those? Does it just depend on the story?
It depends on the story, but as far as the design aesthetic, I do like standing. Oh, I've seen Wolfen. I know exactly what film you're talking about. I had to pull it up. Yeah, Wolfen's actually a pretty decent film.
It's really good. Albert Finney.
Yeah, I like. Is Albert Finney in it?
Mm-hmm.
God, I need to go back. Albert Finney will always be Scrooge to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, always. But I would definitely say that. But a good one as far as design aesthetic, and I actually like the film, is Dog Soldiers.
That's a fucking good movie, dude. Yeah. Yeah.
That is just a zombie film with werewolves.
So, all right, let's get out of the 80s. Anything else we should touch on? I know we're missing a ton of shit, but we still got a couple decades to go.
I would say 80s, we could do 2 hours just on the 80s, yeah. So I think we covered it.
All right, let's move on to the 1990s, and I want to kick this one off with something. The slasher film was kind of already going out of vogue Wes Craven came in with the New Nightmare, which was or A New Nightmare, which was like, I don't know, the 6th or 7th fucking Nightmare on Elm Street movie. But he decided that he was going to meta contextualize what the slasher genre was, like what basically its social and cultural relevance. And New Nightmare was good. It was super fucking meta. It was basically like Freddy Krueger, the franchise, existed. Heather Langenkamp played Nancy, and Heather is now being haunted by the spirit of Freddy because her husband's working on a new Freddy movie, and Wes Craven's telling her about why, how myths can like get out of control. It's fucking interesting. But I say all of that to say that that was kind of the inception of Scream, and Scream really deconstructed the slasher genre, and in my opinion, probably ruined it for decades to come. Because once you see the way that the fucking sausage is made, it's really hard to look at sausage the same again afterwards. Were you a fan of the Kevin Williamson, Wes Craven little era of early 90s slasher movies? Specifically
No,
Scream, and then all the shit that it kicked off.
Yeah, I would say Scream, the first Scream, I actually think is a brilliant film. I think I love that it plays so heavily into the tropes. It's a love letter to horror films while almost parodying it at 100%. The same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's brilliant. I love the first Scream. Every other Scream after that is absolute garbage. I never saw the TV show. I'm assuming it's also absolute
Would not
garbage.
watch it. Would not watch it.
But like all the other stuff that came out after, like, what was it? I know what you did last summer.
Garbage. Urban Legends, garbage.
Garbage. What was another one? I know there was more.
Those are the big ones that stick out to me. That I remember. They were all Kevin Williamson produced, but there was also like The Faculty, which was a Robert Rodriguez movie. There was
Faculty's not bad.
No, it's not. It's not. And I like the second Scream pretty good. After that, I was definitely done with the Scream. I saw the latest one, and I agree with you about it being a love letter and a parody. And I think that's a lot of times what people overlook about parody is it's not just destroying the thing that you love. Like, in order to do a good parody, you have to have reverence for the thing that you're sending up. Like, if you don't understand the tropes, you can't employ them in a way that's like that works for it. And that was one of the things about Halloween 2018 that's just really tough to look past is Scream. Like, we know what's going to happen. It's become a fucking punchline. So, like, what I did think about the new Halloween is it was, like, the most earnest slasher movie post-Scream that actually was good. Like, it kind of recaptures what it is to like slasher movies without having to make fun of it. So that was what was going on kind of at the forefront of the horror movies in the 90s, but there had to have been some good shit peppered in there too, right?
One that you have to mention, I think it's the last year, but so we're not quite there yet, but Sixth Sense, I would have to say is kind of changed cinema for a while after that. Not necessarily horror, but that's a notable one for me. Is always M. Night Shyamalan's influence, especially that plot twist at the end that everybody did thereafter for fucking 15 years.
Okay, what about, oh, fuck, dude, I gotta go way back. Candyman. Did you see it?
Which one?
Candyman?
I've actually haven't seen Candyman since I was a little kid. I don't even know if I ever finished it at the time.
It is so fucking good. It's like probably in my top 10 favorite movies list. And the reason why is just really rich on atmosphere. I think it's like use of Cabrini Green housing projects is really, it's a compelling setting, and to use urban legends within an urban setting it was a fresh take on horror. I really am a fan of Clive Barker, and we skipped over Hellraiser from the 1980s. Nightbreed was 1992 or something like that. And that was kind of Clive Barker's heyday. Cool. Yeah, dude. Okay, so you've seen Nightbreed.
Oh, yeah. I like Nightbreed. I think
good
it's a
monster
different
makeup.
I like it because they're the good guys, the monsters.
Yeah.
I think it's just a cool take.
And in a way, Candyman is a very sympathetic character. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of that movie. I think that it did really well. And also the 1990s kind of birthed another type of horror movie, I think, with movies like Seven and Silence of the Lambs, which it's hard to say. Is it a horror movie? Is it a psychological thriller? Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, it's funny. I almost brought up one in the 70s or 80s called Blowout. That's very similar. I don't know if you've ever seen Blowout with John Travolta and the dad from Third Rock from the Sun, and don't know why I can't think of his name.
The dad. Lithgow. Raising Cain.
Yeah.
Raising Cain.
No, it's called Blowout.
Okay, no, I hadn't seen it.
It's actually a really good movie. It's about a guy who I'm going back a little bit, but the same thing. It reminds me of those. Like I don't know if I could consider it horror films. I debated bringing up like Seven. I don't know if it is, but it's about a guy who he's an audio engineer and he's recording sound effects and he thinks he hears a blowout and then he starts listening to it and he's like, man, I think I heard a gunshot, then a blowout. And so he starts like investigating it, and it kind of gets more into this like horror thriller vibe. It's actually a phenomenal film that my mom showed me one
Sounds
day.
good.
She's like, "Have you ever seen this?" And I watched it, and I was like, "This is really good. Why are you holding out on me?" You know?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, The Craft was another one of those 90s movies that was post-screen that was kind of in that same little cheesy category. Interview with the Vampire and Bram Stoker's Dracula. First, it was 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula with Keanu Reeves, Gary Oldman, Anthony Hopkins, and Winona Ryder. Were you a fan of that?
I absolutely love
Fucking love that movie.
that film. It's brilliant in every sense. Like it's as close as you can get to a perfect horror film for me.
Keanu's performance is so goddamn awful, but I don't care. Like, it's funny in the context of it.
Keanu Reeves, but Gary Oldman's is so fucking brilliant.
It's so good. And who could have been a better freaking Van Helsing than Anthony Hopkins, you know?
Yeah, like there's so much right with it. Have you ever actually read the book of Bram Stoker's?
100%, yep.
I went back and read it probably in my 20s because I'd never read it, and it's surprisingly good still. Like that book holds up so well.
Yeah, it is very good.
Oh.
The 90s was kind of interest, like it seemed like what they were trying to do was horror movies that weren't like beholden to all the shit that came before them. Like they were trying to do some unique stuff, and I thought Interview with the Vampire was cool because it took a novel that was released in the 70s and brought in a cast that was way too high of pedigree for a, you know, your regular horror movie. It was Tom Cruise, Kirsten Dunst, Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas, fucking Stephen Ree. There were like so many good people, and it was directed by Neil Jordan, who did Company of Wolves in the 1980s. And it was like, it is a stretch to call Interview with the Vampire a horror movie. It is more of a fucking period drama, but at the same time, it's about vampires.
I always say that all the time. Like I always put it in my top 10 like vampire films, but I never put it in my horror films. And people go, "Why?" I'm like, "Because it's not a horror film. It's a drama about vampires, but it is not a horror film."
What about? Go ahead.
Oh, speaking of movies that are different, have you ever seen Ravenous?
Oh, dude, yeah, that's another good cannibal movie.
That still might be my favorite. It is my favorite horror film score of all time.
I need to go back and listen to it. That's not what I remember about it.
It's brilliant. Like you go back and watch it. Mainly, there's just one thing that is there's a theme that is as iconic as like the Friday the 13th and the Halloween theme. Like it's that well done. The theme of there's this one theme that it's like the cannibal theme through the movie. It's brilliant.
I'm definitely gonna check it out. Oh fuck, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer came out in the 90s sometime.
Never seen it.
Oh god. Oh, it's a good watch, but it's messed up. From Dusk Till Dawn. Where do you fall on that one?
Absolutely love it. I even like the horrible sequels.
Okay, I hadn't seen Texas Blood Money or whatever the other one's called. The Hangman. Hangman in Texas Blood Money. Yeah, I'm familiar. I love Dusk Till Dawn. I wish that I would have never seen a trailer for it before I walked into it because it is such a bait and switch, you know?
Me too. That movie, it's almost, I wish it would have the trailers I understood they couldn't have done it, but I wish the trailers would have been a robbery film, like a bank heist film. In fact, my wife, the great thing about being married to a foreigner sometimes is they have no knowledge of this. So she's never seen this. I need to sit her down and watch it and go, "Hey, we're going to watch this movie about a robbery or whatever, you know, and just let it play." Because I want to see someone get that reaction that I never had.
Yeah, 100%. It really, really just changes what you're watching more than halfway through the movie, probably. I love the 90s in horror movies, though, because I overlooked the cheese, like Frankenhooker, Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, Lake Placid, all of the 1990s TV adaptations. Oh, yeah, Leprechaun. There was so much good stuff coming out then. So, yeah, it was a real... It's weird. Like, it's a decade that I overlook when I'm thinking about horror movies. Audition came out then, Arachnophobia, Sleepy Hollow.
I was just going to say, for the Japanese, I would say the 2000s is where obviously we'll get to is where like Japanese Asian horror film really uh, got into the America conscious. But I would say it started in the 90s with films like Audition that were like cult classics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned The Sixth Sense, which was 1999, and definitely an influential movie. I mean, there were movies like The Others that came out afterwards that really just owe everything to what Sixth Sense did before. But another equally influential movie that came out in 1999 was The Blair Witch Project.
That movie, it was like literally like the same way I said M. Night Shyamalan didn't just change horror, he changed his film. Blair Witch, even more so, influenced just film. I mean, movies like Cloverfield would not exist without Blair Witch.
Right, right. And I knew going into it that it wasn't real. Not like I deserve a big fucking pat on the back for that. What's crazy is that other people didn't, but they tried really
That's
hard.
my thing. I was like, I obviously as a child knew this wasn't real because I have fucking two brain cells to rub together. So, but it was amazing to me how many people didn't who thought it was real.
And once you put me in that theater, it didn't matter. Like, I was so invested in those fucking characters. It was overwhelming because it felt so naturalistic. It doesn't show you anything. It lets your imagination do the fucking heavy lifting. It's smart. It was improvised, so it just felt very real. And I watched this really cool film theorist video where he basically said that Josh and Mike killed Heather, that the whole thing was just an elaborate ruse to get her out here, because you don't see anybody die. All you see is Mike and Josh, sorry. All you see is Josh like facing the wall in the end, and then the camera drops, and what this theory is that it was the other guy that attacked her from behind. And after hearing that film theorist video, it's like the moon landing shit. When you hear the conspiracy theories, you're like, oh, that's pretty compelling, but they've only focused in on the shit that they've got an answer for, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I love when people are like, the moon landing was staged. Then why have we never been back? Then why have we never been back? And I'm like, dude, we went back 5 times after that. What the fuck are you talking about?
That always cracks me. Why haven't we been back? I'm like, we have.
Several times. There's video of it.
This just wasn't national news because there wasn't a like world news like it was because we'd already been there.
And when people are like, well, why don't we do it now? Because it's a big barren fucking rock with nothing there. You know, there's no reason to go there. Anyways.
Yeah, believe me, if there was a resource or something, we would go there, but there's no reason to.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I buy that. But anyways, yeah, okay. So that kind of moves us into the aughts. We'll go ahead and just from the 2000s to now, there have been so many movies released that it's really hard to kind of narrow it down like we did with previous generations. I mean, with the internet coming onto the scene and just having access to so many movies that the video store couldn't keep on the shelves before. It's like we have access to everything now. So all of a sudden the market got so flooded where you could go and watch a movie like Hatchet, which is a throwback to the 1980s slasher movies, or something like Final Girls, or if you want to watch something more psychological, you've got things like The Witch and It Follows. I mean, nowadays there is truly something for everybody. But do you have some favorites from the 2000s?
I'm just looking at the list. It's so huge that one of the ones pops in my head is Goodnight Mommy. Always, I will bring that up every time I can.
It's a really good movie.
It's the 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later, I think, was a phenomenal series.
Do you have a preference over one or the other?
28 Weeks, I think, is a much stronger film.
I do too. I think we're kind of...
Everyone disagrees, but I think it's a much stronger film.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. The Ring, obviously, was the American remake, and that kind of kicked off the American J-horror reboots and things like that. But The Descent is one that comes up a lot. You mentioned Dog Soldiers. The Descent was Neil Marshall's follow-up.
I watched The Descent 2 days ago.
And?
Oh, it's fucking garbage. God,
what?
I hate that movie. I wish I hadn't gone back and watched it.
Oh, you'd seen it before. This wasn't the first time you watched it.
No, I love that movie.
And you went back and watched it and it ruined it for you.
It ruined it for me. I was like,
Damn.
Oh my God. I went and bought it and watched it, and I was like, what the fuck did I buy this for?
What's the fuck? What happened, dude?
It's super cheesy. It's horribly acted. Everything about it is it's just a bad film in every sense of the word. Like, I was blown away. It feels closer to like a 1990s horror film like the post Scream type of thing than it should anything else. Like it's this corny group of like teen angsty, even though they're in their 30s, characters that are like extreme X Games
Yeah.
type of people, and it's a bad film.
So the early 2000s introduced us to basically the torture porn genre with Saw, followed by Hostel, followed by some other ones I'm not going to be able to think of right now, The Collector and all of that shit. Do you have any feelings on that subgenre?
No, I mean, I didn't care for Saw. I liked Hostel a lot more than Saw for me personally. They never really captivated me. They were just, I think then also too, I was still kind of suffering from that post Scream, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
been fucking 10 years, to where for a while, horror films got ruined for me, where they were just cheesy and garbage. And there were ones here and there that would pop up that I would really enjoy. Um, and I honestly, I think I'm still feeling the effects of that. Another one that's more recent, that why I think I like films like this is It Comes at Night. Again, I don't even know if you really could call it a horror film, but it's a really good survival drama. That's another one.
Yeah, I prefer the original Saw to any of those other ones. I like the first Hostel a lot. I think what another Hostel is an exploitation movie. I think where Hostel succeeds is again giving you that feeling of catharsis at the end when the character finally is able to reclaim his power basically and fucking cuts the dude's fingers off underneath the stall in the bathroom and just like goes and starts fucking up all these horrible European people, which I mean we can all agree they're the fucking worst, right? um, just Europe in general. I'm not even talking about a specific part of it. The whole continent just full of
It's
shitty
all the
murderous, yeah.
garbage. You'd only speak in German if it wasn't for us.
Yeah. Oh shit, The Mist was fucking awesome, dude. Did you like that?
I actually really like The Mist. I think they made a TV show of it too.
It's bad. Did you see it?
Oh no, I didn't
It's
watch it.
bad. It's leave it in the past, dude. Like you were saying about The Descent. I'm never gonna rewatch The Descent. Stay away from the Mist TV series. I just how nihilistic the end of The Mist was just like I've never seen something where it was just like, oh fuck.
No, it's definitely intense. One that I do have to mention, another horror film that I watched. Well, again, horror film that I think is brilliant. Is Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
So good, so good.
Oh, so we watched that. Me and my wife watched it because I was slipping through and it popped up, and I was like, "Ooh, we should watch this." And she literally goes, "Oh, I don't want to watch this. I know what it's gonna be about. A bunch of rednecks kill a bunch of teenagers." And I was like, "Okay, now we have to watch this,"
Mm-hmm.
just because she said that. And she died of laughter. We watched it again the other night. I actually fell asleep, but she was cracking up the whole time,
I need to
like
get Victoria to
hysterical
watch
laughter.
that tonight. If she hasn't picked one out yet, that's the one I'm going to suggest because it's watchable. Like Shaun of the Dead, it's a fucking fun movie. You know what I mean?
You definitely still need to see Biozombie, the movie that really heavily influenced Shaun of the Dead.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that to me before, and it slipped my mind. That sounds
So
interesting for sure. So obviously, the torture porn thing kind of kicked off the decade. Right after that, it seems like the found footage film really found its footing. Yeah, because we got a lot of paranormal activity type movies. There was a whole lot that kind of followed that formula. The record movies, which were really good, Mexican versions of the same. You know, they did a movie called Quarantine. Rob Zombie came onto the scene, obviously, with The Devil's Rejects. More recently, we started getting introduced to people like Adam Wingard and Ty West and, what was it, Adam Green, I think. A lot of these kind of new school horror directors, younger guys that were heavily influenced by John Carpenter, and I've been a big fan of a lot of their work.
I think we also have movies I haven't seen, but we definitely need to talk about because just how relevant they are. Insidia, not Insidious. I was Conjuring.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, I mean, I think we've talked about it before. Where do you stand on the original Conjuring?
Never seen any of them.
Oh, okay. Okay. My friend Andrea, she thinks that they're like bad movies. And to me, like they feel very 1970s, very true to the genre, which in a way means that, of course, they're going to be a little bit formulaic. They're kind of kitchen sink horror movies where they do the ghost story, the possession thing. Like it's all in all of them. Possessed dolls, all that kind of shit. But I think they succeed really well just in having like an old school haunted house feel to them. I thought they were all good. I really like The Conjuring. I really like The Conjuring 2. The Nun was shit. The second Annabelle was fine. The first Annabelle was garbage. James Wan just knows his way around a horror movie set. Like, I think Insidious, they're not great movies, but they have this great haunted house quality to them, you know?
I love the first Insidious.
It's a cool movie. Session 9 was a really fucking creepy movie that came out.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
David Caruso. It feels very much like a David Fincher movie. It's real grimy locations. It came out in 2001. David Caruso. Who directed it? That's all I'm trying to look for. Brad Anderson, which that doesn't sound like somebody I know of. But then I look at his IMDb page, and he did The Machinist, Trans-Siberian, The Call. He's done some good shit. He did the TV series The Sinner, or parts of The Sinner, which was a fucking great show. But yeah, there's so much we're hitting the almost 2-hour mark.
We almost went 2 hours. I think that's a good Halloween live stream.
Yeah, for sure. So are you gonna watch a horror movie tonight?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I would say if the wife can stay awake, but at this point it's been me who's fallen asleep early. If I can stay awake, I will definitely watch one.
Yeah, I'm going to go check out what we're watching. We're going to get some dinner. Thank you guys so much for stopping by to check out this edition. We hope you had a happy Halloween and that you come back and say what's up to us on the next live stream over here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. CST. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to People Are Terrible, where good friends have terrible conversations. Me and Caleb will be over there. We're always taking user-submitted, viewer-submitted topics, so make sure to keep those guys coming. We've had some good conversations lately. I am in the midst of transitioning from a man to a woman. I'm in the midst of transitioning from one computer to another, so I got to get my workstation back up and running before I can get us on a super tight schedule. But if you want to check out the entire version of People Are Terrible, head over to SoundCloud and check out People Are Terrible. We've got the podcast feed going over there, so you can listen to us on your way to work or in the gym or walking your dog or taking a shit or whatever you perverts do. I'm Jeremy. And on behalf of me and Caleb, be terrible.